My son, I was sitting next to my son the other day. He was watching TV, and he was holding up his blanket in his ear in his hand next to his face to block me. Just watching the show like that.
Oh, no!
Yeah.
How old is he?
3.
Every little thing you think that you need, every little thing you think that you need, every little thing that's just feeding your greed. Oh, I bet that you'd be fine without it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Minimalist Podcast, where we discuss what it means to live a meaningful life with less. My name is Joshua Fields Milburn.
And I am Ryan Nicodemus, and together we are the Minimalists. And today we've got a special guest.
Yeah, this is episode 115, and we're going to talk about being happier today. And we don't do interviews on the podcast, mainly because I'm not that intrigued by interviews, but occasionally we'll bring a friend on our live events, and we'll have a little bit of a conversation. But this is our first in-studio episode with a guest. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dan Harris is here with us.
Thanks for coming, man.
I'm honored. Thank you. I hope I don't prove the case that you shouldn't have guests.
Well, this is the test. We're only going to test it once.
I just hope this doesn't turn into the Dan Harris podcast.
Yeah, that's a danger. I'm not going to lie to you.
We're open to that. I'm just kidding, man.
So the reason we don't do interviews is I'm just a bad interviewer, and so I would just ask bad questions. But so what we do with
I don't believe that.
Well, I mean, I would say something like, "Hey, Dan, you've done cocaine before, and you meditate. Have you ever meditated on cocaine?"
I like that question.
People don't typically ask that?
No, but I like the questions that people don't typically ask.
Okay, well, we'll get to that one, hopefully. But what we do is we turn to our audience for the questions for this podcast. And so we've got some questions from our audience today. We've got some people who called in and asked some questions, and we also got some lightning round questions. But for those of you who are uninformed, Dan Harris is the author of a book called 10% Happier, which came out 4 years ago, and it totally changed my perspective on meditation. Because much like you, I was, in my 20s especially, I was like this suit and tie corporate guy, and so was Ryan. And I heard the word meditation, and I was allergic to it, right? And then Sam Harris recommended your book, and I read it, and the thing that I loved about it is, it was incredibly well written. And,
Thank you.
As a memoir, and the story really like pulled me into it, but then it helped me understand this shift in mindset that got you to meditate. So you had a bit of a meltdown on national TV. For those people who don't know, Dan is the anchor on Nightline, also Good Morning America on the weekends, and you were in front of 5 million people, and all of a sudden had a panic attack. And that led you to this time of sort of self-reflection and realizing some things needed to change. And so I looked at that book as very much a why-to book. And now you have a new book out. It's called Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. And it is a how-to book.
I love that framing. I'm going to steal that. I'm not going to give you any credit.
That's fine. We'll edit this out so you don't have to give us the credit. But I think the two complement each other really well, because you had this why-to side of things, and I think that's important. In fact, when Ryan and I dive into minimalism, you'll never hear us talk about the 83 ways that you can declutter your sock drawer, because I'm less intrigued by the how-to side of things at first, because I think you need the leverage, the why-to side of things. So I think the how-to is a perfect complement once you understand why it's important. If you don't know why it's important, you might start meditating, and then you do it for a day or 2 days. You're like, well, why am I doing this? This is stupid. I'm not getting any benefit immediately. My life hasn't changed over the weekend of meditating, and all of a sudden I'm going to walk away from this, as opposed to realizing, oh, why do I need to do this? Why do I need to add this clarity, or why do I need to regain some, I don't know how you would describe it, but for me, meditation has been a way to calm the chaos.
Yeah.
In a world, it's not about removing myself from the chaos. And I see so many parallels between the meditation side of things and minimalism. If they're on a Venn diagram, I'm sure that there's a ton of overlap. But the thing that minimalism has done for me, it's not getting away from the world and becoming a monk or an ascetic. It is allowing me to function in a world that is relatively chaotic by removing that desire of constantly consuming and allowing me to let go of not just the stuff, but the desire to endlessly bring the objects into my life. The average human being is going to own millions of possessions over his or her lifetime. And the average American household has 300,000 items in it. So we have all this chaos around us. And it's not about removing myself from that and just becoming a peripatetic traveling monk. It's about, how do I function in this world a bit better? And I think what you've done with meditation is a way to say, okay, I don't have to meditate 18 hours a day. I don't have to constantly be on retreat. I need to step back, and maybe I can even enjoy meditation. And I think that's the thing that your new book outlines well, is your co-author sort of set up this exercise of wouldn't it be such a novel idea if I enjoyed this thing called meditation?
That was hard for me.
And it's still hard for me. So I think what we'd like to do today is we've got some questions. We'll dive into it, and we can go in a bunch of different directions based on these questions. One of my favorite sort of pedagogical techniques is, if I don't have a good answer to a question, we'll just answer a different question and move around a little bit.
Robert McNamara, who had to sell the Vietnam War to America, which was obviously a tough job, used to say that don't answer the question you've been asked, answer the question you wish you had been asked.
Yes. Yeah, and
that's a good tactic.
Well, and you're in media, so you also understand that's sometimes people ask you a question and they're actually asking you a different question at the same time.
That's true.
So what is the question behind the question?
That's really actually very true.
So let's dive into a few of these questions. Our first question is from Coral in Bend, Oregon.
I found minimalism through your podcast, and honestly, it has put a definition on a pre-existing part of my life that I didn't quite understand or know how to express. People think it's crazy for a 20-something-year-old not to have a TV, computer, or Wi-Fi at home, but now I can just call it minimalism. Your podcast has really exposed the fact that I could be so much happier. I know now that I can make changes to be happier day to day. I don't need to feel bad for hating my quote-unquote secure job that I worked so hard to obtain. I can move to a different city that better serves my individual needs, and I can obtain financial freedom by eliminating my debt. The problem is, the more clearly I can see how truly happy I can be in the future, the more discontented I am today. I can't pay my debt overnight. I don't have a plan for leaving my job quite yet. I realize that even when I do find a more fulfilling job or pay my debt off, it won't be like, well, that's it. I reached the summit. I no longer need to grow as an individual. So what kind of recommendations can you guys make for me to focus on being happier today?
That's a great question, Coral. Dan? I'm just kidding.
Dan, can you help her be 10% happier?
Man, I bet Dan's got a great answer for this one.
It's what's fascinating here is, I think once you put a name on something, I mean, for me, like I said, I heard the word meditation, and same thing with minimalism. I think minimalism was the most perfect word and also the most imperfect word to describe, because it conjures these sort of stark images of white walls and owning no possessions and the person who lives out of a dumpster or a backpack or whatever, and it can be that. And I think the same thing with meditation. It can be the Buddhist monk who does nothing but meditate, but it can also be a person who uses it to function better and to be, well, as I'm sure you get endless jokes about being 10% happier at this point, just like, and we get the same jokes about minimalism, where it's
everything we do is steeped in irony.
Yeah,
yes.
Everything becomes ironic, and so if you have a moment of discontent in your life, Dan, I assume someone's asking you, how do you become 10% happier?
Oh, yes. Yes.
But of course, the thesis of that first book was that 10% happier compounds year over year over year over year, and then over the course of a decade, you're 100% happier. Or actually, that's not how compound interest works, but it would be quicker than a decade. But
I'm not good at math either, just so you know, so don't look at me for the answer.
Anyway, and I think that's the point. Is quite often we want the quick fix, and I think that's why minimalism can be appealing at first, because it's like, I'll just get rid of all my stuff and be happy. And I often have to tell people like, no, that's the initial bite at the apple. That's the thing that our short answer is minimalism is the thing that gets us past the things so we can make room for life's most important things, which aren't things at all. And so I think it's the same thing with meditation. It has to do with, and I don't think the only thing that's going to make Coral happier here is, well, you're going to have to sit down and meditate for an hour a day. But she's identified some problems in her life, and now she's focusing on the problems. And I think the one thing that I would say, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, is that she's in a place of discomfort, but it doesn't have to be a place of discontent. In fact, I think the two are often opposite. I think, in fact, I was just having coffee with your wife earlier, and we were talking about the struggle of having kids. You have a 4-year-old, you have a 3-year-old, and it's a meaningful experience, but it's also really difficult. But I think most things that are uncomfortable, that struggle, lead to a particular kind of contentment. And I struggle immensely. I don't know if you still struggle as much with meditation, but I still struggle with meditating. It seems like a struggle, and trying to enjoy it is, I don't know, maybe it's my analytical brain, but I'm at a point where I find that it's necessary, but I don't necessarily enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've got this funny situation where you've said about 15 things that I want to respond to, and I'm just trying to line the planes up on the runway to figure out. Let me start with Coral, since I like her more than I like either of you.
Me too.
So Coral's thing is really interesting, and I think she's achieved more of a victory than she's giving herself credit for. Well, first of all, there's the victory of having latched onto your philosophy, which sort of matched a pre-existing philosophy that she had that she didn't have a name for, and really having a sense now of how she wants to reorient her life. That's obviously a victory. But then another victory that I don't think she's giving herself credit for is seeing the discontent that is with her right now, seeing that she's living for some future state as opposed to what's happening right now. And that is the first step toward actually addressing it, because you know, most of us have. There's this great phrase from a writer who I often make fun of, but his name is Eckhart Tolle. He has this phrase, the background static of perpetual discontent. That we have this. It's what the Buddhists call suffering. They don't. When the Buddhists talk about suffering, the Buddha's his principal pronouncement after having achieved enlightenment, whatever that is, was life is suffering. It's actually a bit of a mistranslation. Suffering means if you live your life only trying to get things you want and trying to avoid things you don't want, it will be inherently unsatisfying because you live in a chaotic, impermanent universe where you can't control much. And so what she's engaged in, or what she's starting to get in touch with, is the suffering that's involved with living for a future state but not being in any way happy right now. The New Age trope that has the unfortunate attribute of being correct is that right now is all we ever get. The future she's envisioning will be experienced as right now when it arrives. And everything that happened to her in the past happened right now. And so this all gets around to me making the pitch I make all the time is one way to sort of one practice that can help you get out of living for a future state and actually living right now and wringing as much pleasure and joy and satisfaction and meaning out of what's happening right now is ... meditation. It's very good for that. And it is basically this exercise for the brain and the mind where you learn over and over to see that you're caught in these knots of future-oriented thinking or jealousy or anger or planning or whatever it is your mental hobgoblin of the moment may be, and you can let it go. And it's not magic. It doesn't work all the time, but I think it works 10% of the time. And it can be something, I think, for many beginners, it is, and I would put myself at kind of the end of the beginning because I've been doing it for about 9 years. And
some people, I mean, I'm imagining Coral right now saying, wait, you're still a beginner after 9 years. That's disheartening. Or that
that's
is...
Right. That's right.
it turns me off, so I don't even want to have to.
That's kind of encouraging to me though.
Yeah.
Because it's like being a beginner in 9 years, it makes me feel like, oh, it's okay. I mean, I think this should be an encouraging thing for Cora. Like, oh yeah, like, man, if you're still a beginner in 9 years, it's okay that I'm a beginner day one.
Absolutely. And, one way to think about it is I often compare meditation to exercise because it is exercise for your brain.
Absolutely.
And it shows up on the brain scans. I mean, you're changing your brain as you do it. I have been exercising for a long time. I'm 46 years old. I've been exercising since recess, right? But I am never going to play pro sports, and that doesn't stop me from exercising. Right. I don't need people. Yeah. There's something about some people's approach to meditation. By the way, I'm one of these people that they want to win at it, as if it's something you can win. Yeah, or it's even if it's not a competition with other people, it's a competition with yourself.
Sure.
Or they get into this whole story about how they're failed meditators because the first time they sit down and meditate, they're distracted a lot. That if I handed you a flute, like you couldn't play Jethro Tull immediately. Meditation is a skill that you learn over time, and by the way, it can take a lifetime to get really good at it, whatever that even means.
Right, and I think that's the problem is because being handed the flute, you have sort of this outcome. And at some point, you're whether it's playing a sport or a musical instrument, there is an outcome where people can sort of check the box and say, I've done this, this, and this, and now I've acquired this skill set. And with meditation, I think people struggle because it's a bit nebulous.
Yeah, I'll give you an outcome. Yeah. Are you less of an asshole? Seriously.
Yeah, and the quite often you're not the one that gets to quantify that.
That's right.
Though,
That's my wife is sitting on a couch over there, and you tell me, Bianca, if I say this correctly. I think she would say I'm less of an asshole. However, I retain the capacity to be a schmuck on occasion, but it's about that trend in the right direction. And if you're looking for a box to check, that's a great box to check.
Yeah, but I've noticed this with you. You are a master self-deprecator. You do a really good job of deprecating yourself to the extent that like I'm an asshole or I am a schmuck is the word that or I'm fidgety. It's in the title of your new book, and I think that is one way to humble yourself, but also. If I look at the flip side of that, is that also just a defense mechanism that you throw up beforehand? And if so, does that abdicate you from the responsibility of just not being an asshole without meditating?
No, I mean it may be. There may be all sorts of subconscious currents that feed my self-deprecation that I'm unaware of. But to the extent I'm aware of it, I use it as a tactic for the following reason, which is I am positioning myself as the anti-guru, and I've found that a very useful tactic is to tell the truth.
Right. Yeah.
And it happens to be the truth that I'm flawed in many, many hilarious ways. Some of them actually not so hilarious if you happen to be my wife. And why I think that's useful is that one of the great things about meditation is not that you conquer all of your neuroses, but that you instead, in the words of a great meditation teacher, become a connoisseur of your neuroses. And if you can't have a sense of humor in that endeavor, you are fucked. And that is the point.
Yeah. No, I always think like the best way for me to I don't know, like all my imperfections to like not let them be as bad as imperfections as I call them out, because if I shine light on them, then like no one else can shine light on them. And I can also, like you do, talk to people how I've been able to overcome these imperfections. So yeah, I think it's great that you do that. I want to talk about, if I may, Corals talks about happiness. And I want to get your thoughts on this, man. I think that in Western society, I mean, it's written in our Constitution, we must pursue happiness. Now, don't get me wrong, I love to be happy. So I'm not saying that happiness isn't something that I like to have, but I feel like growing up in my 20s, when I was in that crazy corporate world, working 60, 70, sometimes 80 hours a week, man, I was chasing happiness so much. In fact, I would argue that I would actually get it every once in a while. But it was something that was very fleeting. It's like I would get that new car and I was happy until that first car payment, or I'd go on that vacation and it was great until I got the credit card bill the next month. But I feel like happiness is something that for me now, it's not the point. Happiness is happiness. Again, I love it, and I want to have as much happiness as I can in my life. For me, though, I think living a meaningful life is my purpose, and I think happiness is kind of this byproduct that happens from living a meaningful life. So with Coral, the question I want her to ask herself is like, what does living a meaningful life? What does that mean for her? Because I think that will help her get to the happiness. What do you think, man? Do you think happiness is too much of a focus right now? Am I totally way off base with that, or?
Well, I'd just like to ask you, how are you defining happiness? Because based on what I just heard from you, I suspect that you're conflating excitement with happiness.
Yeah, I would absolutely say that for me, the definition of happiness would be some type of elation.
Yeah, or getting what you want.
Yeah, or it would be some type of excitement.
And that is really fleeting.
Yes.
So
maybe it's not her chasing happiness, but maybe how she perceives happiness.
I think she's like so far on her way that she's identified the things that will make her life more meaningful. She's taking the steps. I think the rut into which she has fallen, which is a minor one and easy to get out of, is that she's so focused on achieving this halcyon future she's created for herself that she's refusing to enjoy what she has right now. She should take an enormous amount of pride in the reorientation that she's undergoing and do her best to enjoy that process, which is just freighted with meaning. But happiness, I just want to get back to that for a second. Because happiness, the root of the word, represents our cultural ambivalence about the subject. Hap, H-A-P, is the same root of the word haphazard or hapless. It means luck.
Oh, wow.
And so it's basically a shitty word, and it doesn't really mean anything. And the only reason I used it in the title of my first book was because it's the word most of us use when we talk about mental well-being.
Absolutely.
But there are much more specific words that actually have a higher bar in terms of meaning, have a higher value. Words? Meaning, well-being, kindness, compassion, patience, inner peace, calm. These are all attributes that we want, and as it turns out, they are trainable through meditation. Well, I just want to say one other thing. The best definition I've heard of happiness, whatever, because I've asked a lot of these gurus and meditation teachers, what is happiness? And I was asking this guy, Dr. Mark Epstein, who's a great writer. Bianca gave me a book by him that led me to meditation, actually, and it was called Going to Pieces Without Falling Apart, but he's written many books. I was having dinner with him, and I asked him, what's your definition of happiness? And he said something that was initially very unsatisfying, more of the good and less of the bad. Now, okay, so that sounds a little, I don't know, but think about it like, I'm shitty at math. We've already established that, but I'm now going to use a math analogy, like a geometry analogy. So if you think about a graph, it has a y-axis which runs up and down and an x-axis which runs horizontally. So in psychology, there is this idea of a happiness set point, so which would be the x-axis, which kind of runs side to side. That good things can happen to you. So on the y-axis, it would go above x. In other words, your happiness would go high, but then generally it reverts to the set point.
Right.
Bad things happen, you go below, and then you revert to the set point. My thing of what happens with meditation is that the top of that graph, the good stuff, gets higher and more sustained because you are enjoying the good things that happen to you, and you aren't rushing off to the next hit of dopamine as you were doing in your 20s with the car and then the car payment, et cetera, et cetera. And then the lower end of the graph, when bad things happen to you, gets shallower because you're not engaging in so much useless rumination, and you're able to recover more quickly. And then I would say simultaneously that the happiness set point itself, the x-axis, goes up. That is more of the good and less of the bad, and that is a workable, serviceable definition of happiness for me.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think the word happy that you used in your book, I think it was the perfect word, because your book doesn't say, here's how to be happy. Here's how to be 10% happier. And with that, it takes a lot of work, for sure. So, no, I agree. Coral is on the right path. She needs to keep up the hard work. But yeah, maybe something like meditation could totally help her take a minute and realize that what she does have, maybe she could be happy with, and also help her to look forward to what she has coming down the road for her.
Give herself a pat on the back for what she's done already.
Absolutely.
Which sounds actually quite towering.
Well, I think that's the other thing. I mean, there's this old cliche, right, about gratitude, and we hear all of these sort of trite sayings about gratitude, and they've been turned into successories posters or whatever. But I think the truth is we are what we focus on, and if we're focusing on the moment, on what we don't have, I mean, that seems to always be the thing. Ryan and I wrote this essay a few years ago about Christmas. It was called The Worst Christmas Ever. And there's this kid in the story. It was based off of a real event that happened. That this kid is going through his Christmas presents and opening them all up and really happy in the moment, right? Like ecstatic pleasure in that one moment. Then he discards the toy and moves on to the next thing. And by the end of opening his 10 or 12 presents, he didn't get the one present that he wanted. He wanted this, Optimus Prime thing or whatever, and that's the only thing that he was focused on. So he was overcome with discontent, even though a moment ago he had sort of 12 spikes on the dopamine seismograph or whatever. Like he had all of he had all of the happiness in the moment, but it was absolutely fleeting, and it really had to do with what he was focused on in the moment. Now, his excuse is he doesn't have a fully developed prefrontal cortex, but we don't have this excuse.
And he has horrible parents.
We don't judge, man.
And the truth is that we do the same thing. It's just on a much grander scale.
And that's what the Buddha was talking about when he talked about suffering.
Yeah.
That if your whole life is oriented around getting what you think you want, the pleasure won't last. And if you think that you're going to permanently avoid the unpleasant, I got some bad news for you. And so can you achieve equanimity in the face of whatever it is arises? That is the skill, one of the skills you're training in meditation. It's not it's not magic. It can be hard to do, but it is a worthwhile endeavor. In my view. Can I just address though what you were saying about enjoyment?
Yes.
Because I don't want to let that pass. That was one of the planes I want to get off the runway from before, because it's really important, and I want to hear a little bit more from you about your meditation practice. When you say that you're not enjoying it, what do you mean by that?
I find that. But there's this old saying that writers don't like writing; they like having written.
Yes.
So I
feel that way.
I don't. I'm one of the few writers who enjoys the process more than the artifact.
Oh man, I'm so jealous.
Well, it's the same thing with meditation. It's a flip-flop here, right? Where for me, in the moment, I do feel an ecstatic pleasure, probably 50% of the time. The other 50% of the time I want to put my head through a wall because writing is really hard. But eventually you get to a point where there's something that is good and rewarding in a way that nothing else is rewarding for me. And I assume there's that place in meditation. I just haven't gotten there yet. I'm still, and so I teach a writing class, and the thing that I tell students is when you first start, 80% of the time you're going to want to put your head through a wall.
Yeah.
And eventually, after enough writing, it's going to be 70% of the time. But there's still going to be 7 out of 10 days are going to be bad days for you. And it gets better. And I don't think it ever gets better than 50-50 with respect to writing. And I don't know if those numbers feel right to you for meditation, but I haven't gotten past the 80-20. It's where I still do the meditation, and I have some things that help me through the process. I like to meditate in a sauna, and it sort of facilitates focus in a way that it sort of forces my mind to calm down. But or maybe in a deprivation tank. But I found that for me it's still hard to enjoy. I can just sit there and it's and then I get mad at myself for not enjoying it, right? And then that goes back to the competition thing. I'm competing with myself.
Okay, so I hear so much in what you're saying. And by the way, while I'm about to offer you some corrections, I don't want you to think there's any judgment in it, because I have fallen prey to the exact same psychology that you're describing. So just know, brothers from another mother, but the error I'm hearing in your thinking, and you should jump in if I've misheard you, the most noxious thing you can bring to the meditation party is expectation. Mm-hmm. You are wanting to feel a certain way, and desire, way back to the days of the Buddha, is a classic hindrance to meditation. Yeah. It's a weird video game where you can't make progress if you want to make progress. And so actually the attitude to bring to meditation is, it doesn't matter what I'm feeling. The only game is to see whatever I'm feeling clearly. Why? Because when you see your inner chaos clearly, it doesn't own you. And so it doesn't matter if you sit down and you're totally distracted and you have to start over and over and over again. That's actually a good sit because you're seeing your distraction. When you see your distraction, that is a victory, and it's a victory of real consequence. What's the consequence? The consequence is you are seeing clearly your inner cacophony, and that cacophony has less purchase over your actions. And so if you sit and you're overcome by restlessness, sadness, anger, doubt is one of the most insidious things in meditation, which is this, am I doing it right? Is it worth it? Blah, blah, blah. Then if you see it clearly and just go back to your point of focus, which is usually your breath, that is meditation. And it doesn't matter what you feel, because getting to a special state is irrelevant. You're building a skill here, and the skill is mindfulness, which is just the ability to see what's happening in your mind at any given moment without getting carried away by it. And so the content of what you're seeing is irrelevant to the skill you're training. And when you approach meditation that way, the world's your oyster. It's
funny, man, because I was thinking when you were talking about your meditation practice, I'm like, I don't want to even talk about my meditation practice because it really hasn't changed much from when we talked to you last on your podcast. Doesn't matter. And it's made me feel so much better about it, though. Yes. Because
you should.
Because honestly, like it does a lot for me. I can totally tell the difference. But I go into it with no expectation.
That's beautiful.
And I'm like, you know what? I have a half hour right now. And if I can only concentrate for a minute, then that's what I'll do.
This is why you're the more popular minimalist.
That's not true, but
I'm just trying to foment some sort of because you guys always act like you like each other so much, even like off camera. I'm like, can they really like each other that much? Can I drive a wedge? Is that possible?
Oh, he's just so handsome.
I know, man. I mean, I agree with you. I should be the most popular minimalist.
I agree with that. You should be.
I know. I don't know what's up with that.
Well, Coral, thanks for your question.
Did I get you right?
Yeah, you're spot on. So,
okay.
The two words I thought about before this was expectation, and there was another
desire
EX word that really stood out that I'm blanking on. I'm sure it'll come back. But Coral, real quick, I want to send you a copy of both of Dan's books. Dan, you probably don't know this, but we bought a case of 10% Happier a while ago, and I handed it out to friends and family members. And
thank you.
I autograph it and say it's from you. It's an autograph book. I don't say it's Dan's.
You mean he did not autograph that book you gave me?
Well, it's an autographed book.
I mean, there is an autograph.
Okay, fair.
He's not the right dude.
I found some guy named Dan. Anyway, I'd love to see a copy of both of Dan's books, 10% Happier and Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. We'll have Sean reach out to you, Coral, and send you both of those. Our next question is from Lucinda in Sydney, Australia.
I'm just getting ready to go on a trip, and I've had this gut-kicking, gut-wrenching moment where I've realized I've minimized a wallet that contained a fair bit of cash. I'm just feeling the kind of feeling arc I'm going through is, oh my goodness, I shouldn't have been so reckless in my minimizing. I'm just wondering if either of you guys have had that experience and what helped you just let it go. Because I guess what's done is done and there's not much I can do about it now. But yeah, I just found it kind of made me sort of mentally unwinding whether minimizing stuff was a great idea when you make stupid mistakes like that.
So Dan, she's asking about this wallet and it had cash in it, and we were just talking about desire and we were talking about expectations, but there's another feeling that's in there, and it's that feeling of regret and letting go of something and then regretting it, or taking some sort of action and then regretting it. I don't know if you can talk about how meditation has helped out with regret, or obviously it's helped you let go the same way that minimalism has helped us let go of physical things. I think meditation quite often helps us let go of these internal things.
Yes, definitely. So the Buddhists have this idea of the middle way. And by the way, when I talk about Buddhism, I can't believe, by the way, that I'm a dude who regularly talks about Buddhism. This is not what I would have predicted for myself. When I talk about it, I'm talking about it from a religious perspective. I'm talking about it as a set of practices and a philosophy that happens to be, in my view, brilliant. So the middle way is that we tend to approach most things in our lives like from a binary standpoint, like pleasant or unpleasant, happy or sad, and sunny or cloudy. But actually, generally speaking, there's a lot of nuance. So when you're dealing with things that you've done that you feel badly about, so the two options that are usually on the table for people are denial or flagrant self-laceration. But actually, there is this option that the Buddhists talk about of wise remorse. I think actually there's something to look at maybe she was Lucinda, right? She was perhaps a little bit heedless, maybe in her minimizing. She was excited about it, and she took it perhaps a little too far. It's worth reflecting on that. It is not, however, worth going into a spiral of shame out of which she has trouble pulling herself. And again, meditation is useful for this on two levels. One is what I just discussed, sort of the Buddhist philosophy of being aware that there is such a thing as sort of wise remorse that allows you to examine your behavior without, like getting suicidal. Where meditation as a practice is useful is it boosts your self-awareness so that you can see when you've crossed the line between wise remorse and useless self-recrimination.
So when I look at her, I think of this. There was a time a few years ago where, now I'm a minimalist, so I don't own a whole lot of clothes, right?
Although I like the jacket you were wearing when I saw you this morning.
Well, thank you.
Montclair.
Yeah.
Nice.
Being
I was
a
like, this
minimalist-
is a high-class minimalist here.
I actually got it from eBay.
Oh, you did?
That's my secret. I shouldn't tell anyone.
I was just going to say, being a minimalist, you have to have really nice hair.
Yes.
And you have to have really nice clothes, just not a lot of them.
So I didn't have a whole lot of clothes, but I was going to wash them, and you get in the cycle of everyday life. You know how to do this chore you're about to do, whether it's washing dishes or doing the laundry. And I go to do the laundry, and I put all my clothes, all my dark clothes in the washing machine. I put the detergent in there, and then of course I start pouring the bleach in there. Oof. These are all the clothes that I own functionally, and realize that as I'm pouring the bleach in there, oh shit, and in that moment I'm like, oh, well, I've obviously done something that's wrong, and there's a feeling of regret. And I think what you're saying that feeling is good, because hopefully what it's going to get me to do in the future and in the present is to pay closer attention, even to those relatively mundane tasks. Yes. And I can tell you there are a few times, even last week, where I caught myself almost doing that again, and it allowed me to it reset me. Oh yeah, remember you did that one thing. I felt that pain. I don't want to experience that pain again, because I had to go back out and buy my shirts and pants and all this other stuff because I had ruined basically all of my clothes. And I think it's the same thing. Is you're not going to get that back. And how useful is it to sit at home and worry about the money that you lost by giving that away? In fact, you're probably giving up more time worrying about the thing then you could actually earn that money back with that same time doing something positive with it.
But there's something useful to be learned about how to go about minimizing in a way that's a little bit more mindful. Same thing with doing the laundry, that's in a little bit more mindful. Yeah. But where do you draw the line? And I think the self-awareness that comes with meditation can be useful there.
Lucinda, congratulations. You screwed up. We all screw up. And what you do when you screw up is what Dan said. You take note of that and you learn from it. And if there's listeners out there, they can learn from it too. Remember the one guy at our event who came and he was like, I was minimizing, but my wife and kids, they keep asking me where stuff is. And I look at them, I'm like, oh, sorry, I got rid of that. What do I do? Do you remember we were just like, dude, you have to have a better plan when you minimize stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is, we get really excited about when we take on a new task, and I don't know if you find this with meditation too. I mean, sometimes people dive into the deep end and they get in trouble. If people go on a 10-day retreat and they've never meditated before, you might go to a pretty dark place that is hard to come back from, or you just might be so turned off by the experience you don't ever want to do it again. I think it's the same thing with minimalism. We had a family in Philadelphia who rented a dumpster and threw all their stuff in it, and their house caught fire because there was a dumpster fire. And thankfully they realized the error of their ways, but I could see how that would turn someone off from ever wanting to let go of something ever again.
Yeah.
I assume you did a 10-day retreat recently.
Yeah, I just got back from one.
This is your second or third?
Fourth.
Holy moly!
Yeah.
So if there was a world champion meditator,
trust me, there are people who are way more baller than me. Way. But it's true that in some cases, if you meditation does actually throw you into a tough space. It's pretty rare, from what I can tell. But if what I would say to anybody who has real psychological trauma in their past is that if you want to meditate, that you should do it under professional supervision. You should talk to your mental health provider before you do it. For most people, however, even if you went on a 10-day retreat as your first move, while I think that would probably be jarring, I actually don't think it would necessarily throw you into a dark place.
But it may turn you off. I guess
it may turn you off.
That's the other thing that I'm going for is yeah, I don't think Lucinda here is going to be like, well, I got rid of one wall, I don't ever want to get rid of anything else again. But I could see how it would turn her off from wanting to let go. And letting go of the physical thing is somewhat of a metaphor for just letting go in general.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Just ruminating in this loss is going to do her way more harm than good. What you were talking about really reminded me of how you kind of talked about this selfless or this useless self-rumination in our documentary, and that has stuck with me ever since Matt did that interview with you. So Lucinda, you have mourned your loss, and it's gone. It is a sunk cost at this point. That was one of the biggest just lessons I helped get me through everything when we were going through our minimalist journeys. Even today, it still helps me when I look at something and I'm like, man, I really hate to let that go. But sometimes you got to look at something like a sunk cost, or if I lost something. I have definitely lost money before, and it hurts. But worrying about it is not going to bring it back. The only thing you can do is really plan better the next time you get rid of stuff, Lucinda. So again, congratulations. Learn from your mistake and move on.
Lucinda, I'd love to send you a copy of our book. It's called Essential. It's 12 different chapters, 150 different essays about living a more intentional life. There's one chapter in there on mindfulness, and that bleach story I just told, I wrote an essay about it, about spilling bleach on all of my clothes. And also, since you're in Sydney, we're headed over to Australia in March. We're ending the Less Is Now tour in Australia. We're going to be in 7 cities over there in March: Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, Auckland, New Zealand, and Adelaide. And we're going back to Melbourne. We got a second show there. So Sean, if you would reach out to her, give her a couple tickets to that event, we'd love to see you there.
I kind of want your life.
Oh man, I wish we were going to Rogan tomorrow.
Yeah.
We can trade, man.
Yeah, no kidding. That's pretty great. All right, well, let's see here. Oh yeah, we'd love to hear what you all have to say. So if you're listening to this and you have a comment or a tip about happiness or meditation, including any advice for any of our callers today, leave us a voicemail at 406-219-7839. You can also email a voice memo right from your phone to podcast@theminimalists.com. It's my favorite part of the show. At the end of each show, we air our favorite comments and tips from our listeners. Ryan, what time is it?
You know what time it is. It is time for our lightning round, where we answer questions from social media. So, Dan, what we do is we take a couple questions from social media. We try to get some tweetable size answers in there. We might ramble just a little bit before we get to the answer. But yeah, feel free to jump in, man.
Okay.
But no pressure. If you
All
right.
Indeed. We are on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram @The Minimalists. And as Ryan said, this is where we do our best to answer each question with a short, shareable, less than 140 character response, although I'm told it's 280 characters now. So
We'll still keep it to 140.
yeah, so we call these minimal maxims, and so feel free to inject some sort of Zen koan in here that will tidily wrap up the answers here. Our first question, Ryan.
All right. Our first question is from Christopher. Christopher says, I love it when I meditate. I clearly see the benefits of meditation. I consume everything I possibly can about it, podcasts, books, apps, etc. But I still find it difficult to actually stop and practice. Any tips to just get her done? Is that is that a Cable Guy reference?
Yeah, I think so.
Nice.
So any tips on getting it done? So my short answer would be, and so I practiced this morning, in fact. Prime the pump. Start each day with a small victory. I find for me that meditation works best instead of trying to wait and postpone it to later days. Same thing with exercise. So for me, if I have a few small victories set up my day, I feel like the pump has been primed for other bigger successes throughout the day.
It's really good.
My answer is pretty simple. Better to have spent a minute meditating than tweeting. Now, the irony does not escape me that this is going to be a tweet. But they asked for our advice, so it's a little bit different.
I would say 1 minute counts. And I would just say kind of a version of what both of you said. Now, let me get it down to 140 characters.
1 minute counts is
1 minute
beautiful.
counts.
Yeah,
That's
1
it.
minute count.
Done.
That's perfect, man.
Yeah, when it comes to meditation, 1 minute counts.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So,
That
so
was-
Sean puts all the Sean's not here today. He's coming out to California today. We're building a podcast and film studio here in Los Angeles, and right now we are in the palatial estate of Matt Diavella. We're in his kitchen at his kitchen table.
I think this is technically the dining room.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, it
Yes,
is.
at the top of the Hollywood Hills. No, I'm just kidding.
And so Sean will put all of our pithy answers in the show notes. What's our next question, Ryan?
Our next question is from Sam Wise. How do you maintain happiness and contentment without becoming complacent and stopping moving forward?
So my pithy answer to this one is complacency is not the birthplace of contentment. And I think quite often, like, that's what we're searching for, though. When we were talking to Coral earlier, it's like, once I get to this magical place, if I have the ideal couch and the ideal painting on the wall, and there's nothing inherently wrong with any of these things. In fact, I would argue that many of these things add a particular flavor to life that make it more enjoyable, right? So I'm not against owning things. It's about owning the right things. But we try to get this ideal place of comfort and then wonder why we're miserable. There's a director, Tom Shadyac.
Yeah.
He had that documentary come out called I Am.
Yes, I saw that.
And so he was sort of in this place where he had achieved that level of extreme comfort. And was totally miserable because of it, and so because you think you're going to get there, and that's the thing about a horizon. Once you reach the horizon, there's always another horizon. Oh, that's pithy too, Sean. You can put that in the notes.
Man, after talking to you earlier, I kind of want to rethink my answer here. But what I had written down here is happiness is ephemeral. Living a meaningful life brings lasting rewards. But now I kind of want to append that, because I think the question you asked about the definition of happiness, I don't know why I've never asked that before. I just assumed everyone had the same definition of, you have that feeling of elation where, nothing could really bring you down. I guess maybe there are different levels of that elation. But I also know that if you wake up every single morning elated like that, well, you're probably a manic person.
or you're on drugs. I mean, you have both talked really openly about certain drug addictions in the past, and I think when we try to achieve, and it doesn't have to be through drugs. It can be through achievement, accomplishments, quote, success. We create this new baseline, that XY axis you were talking about earlier, where the new baseline is, I have to get up and take these pills or do blow or whatever just to get back to normal, where the thing that was high has to be the new normal. And I think there's a difference in reaching that in a way that is unnatural, the quick fix, the taking the pill route, and the hard work, the non-complacency of meditation. Although it can seem complacent at times, right? When I think of meditation, I think of the World Series of meditation with the Buddhists and some sort of ashram somewhere or whatever. I think I'm conflating religions there, but I imagine like extreme complacency. And I think even in my 20s, I would have looked at those guys as like, what a bunch of beta males or whatever, right? Like, what are they doing?
Well, I mean, I think in part that's because meditation, as I like to say, has been the victim of the worst marketing campaign for anything ever. And the imagery, traditional imagery around meditation is like a dude in loincloth on the Himalayan mountaintop and floating off into a bubble of bliss. But that isn't actually what it is. It's exercise for your brain. And that's why high-achieving folks at corporations, in the military, in entertainment, in athletics, are doing this thing because it makes you more focused and less yanked around by your emotions, which can have a really salutary effect on your professional life. I think the I don't know if I'll say anything tweetable here, but the mistake that the Twitter question is embedded in that question is to conflate happiness and complacency, and that they're not the same thing. Just because you start to this is a very common concern, and I certainly had it too when I was getting into meditation, because my dad's motto is the price of security is insecurity, and I really believe that. And you know what? I still believe it in many ways.
That's the tweetable answer right there.
The price of security is insecurity, because actually, if you want to do anything great, a certain amount of stress and plotting and planning and worrying is part of the deal.
Risk, which is inherently it requires insecurity.
Yeah.
Yes, but that doesn't. It doesn't mean that what we tend to do is to make our stress worse than it needs to be. And through the self-awareness you generate through meditation, through mindfulness, you can see when you've crossed the line between useless worry and what I call constructive anguish. And that's the money, because you want to have a certain amount of stress, but you don't want to have so much stress that you wear down your resiliency or effectiveness or focus. So it's a tough balance, and meditation can be very useful on that.
I love that, man. Because I think someone told me a long time ago in the corporate world, I think they were probably not right in this sense, but what they said stuck with me. And there was one point where I'm, 80-hour week, and I'm stressing, and one of my coworkers looks at me, and he goes, some stress is good.
He's right.
And I totally agree with that.
Or she's right, whoever.
It was a guy. I mean, either way, though, my point is that I think, again, they were wrong in that situation, because I was wearing down.
Yeah.
And I felt myself wearing down. But I don't try to avoid all stress in my life.
I don't think you can or should, and I don't think I don't think people should be worried that if they meditate, they're going to lose their edge. I think what meditation gives you is boosted focus, lowered emotional reactivity. How can either of those things hurt?
Yeah.
Well, speaking of things that hurt, I think that I've had this love-hate relationship with competition, whether it's competition with myself or competition with others. And when we were living in Montana for the last 5 years, I was doing a sauna with there's an American Indian tribe up there, and one of the guys said something that really resonated with me, and I don't know that it's true 100% of the time, but he said, we look at competition as mental illness. And he goes, because if you lose, I also lose. And if I win, then you win. Or if you win, I win. And that's how we look at it as our tribe. It's a collective sort of winning. And I think it's the same thing what you're talking about there. I think there's probably this middle way where there is a level of competition that is truly toxic, where it is damaging to our personal and professional lives, but then I think there's also a useful amount. There's sort of the friendly competition.
Yeah, but
right?
Look at we're all podcasters here, right? So it's useful for me to look around at whose podcast does really well. What can I learn from them? That is the upside of competition.
Yeah.
The downside is if I'm walking around rooting for my fellow podcast hosts to fail.
Or worse, like you're looking down on yourself because you're not doing as well.
Yeah, that's right.
As your other podcast hosts.
I do a little bit of that.
Well, you should.
But I shouldn't, and it's useful to see.
Yeah.
All right, well, we have time for one overtime question. We do something each week on Patreon where we record a overtime bonus episode. It's called the Minimalists Private Podcast, and you can get it right there on your regular podcast feed. It shows up as a separate podcast, and we do this each week for our Patreon supporters because we don't do advertisements because advertisements suck. And so we've decided to make this podcast 100% advertisement free, 100% listener supported. And so we'll hop on over and do this overtime question from Katie. Here's what we're going to answer from Katie here in a moment. She says, what is your best advice for first-time meditators? And then we have several other similar questions to that. So we're going to hop on over to this overtime question. We'll be right back to the regular podcast. By the way, y'all, if you all want to listen to that bonus episode we just recorded, you can head on over to theminimalists.com, click on donate at the top. There are a bunch of different ways to support this podcast. One final question for you before we move on to our segment called Right Here, Right Now. Have you ever tried to meditate on cocaine, Dan?
You knew you were going to ask that question. No, because by the time I quit doing cocaine, I discovered meditation years after I quit doing cocaine.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Wow. So, just throwing it out there.
I'm sure it's been done.
It's quite the party.
You know,
Yeah.
maybe there's like a listener out there who can call in with a tip or trick.
406-219-7839. All right, let's move on to Right Here, Right Now, so we talk about what's going on in the lives of the minimalists. And I'd like to just talk to Dan real quick and encourage you all to check out 3 things from him. Well, at least 2 for sure. His new book is called Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. It's the how-to side of meditating. If you are unfamiliar with where to get started, I think it's a great place to go. There's also a journey in there, and you talk about your wife and sort of her aversion to meditation, and then also learning to enjoy meditation as well, and the very how-to steps, which weren't covered as much in your first book, 10% Happier, which I also encourage people to check out. There's sort of an addendum there on how to meditate. But then also you have an app. It's called the 10% Happier app. And I can tell you, my partner, Rebecca, it's the only app that's ever worked for her meditation.
Wow.
And so she still uses it daily.
That's really
cool. And I don't know if it's the video-based side of things, but there's also audio on there as well. But there are some tools there that have helped her that she couldn't find elsewhere.
That's really great.
And so if you're looking for a great app to get started, it's called 10% Happier. You can find that wherever you get apps. And then last but not least, you have a podcast called 10% Happier.
I've interviewed these jokers called the Minimalists once on there.
Yes, indeed.
I also interviewed you on Nightline, which was really cool. That aired recently.
Yeah, that was out. That was out just I think last month.
Yeah.
That was great.
That's awesome.
Thanks for having us.
We got a really good response to that.
Did
Awesome.
you?
Yes.
We're glad
good
to
to
hear
hear.
that.
And I know I've said this to you before, but it's worth saying here. I was talking to Matt Diavolo about this before, that the media appearance that has generated the highest number of people stopping me on the street was your film.
I love it, man.
And Sam Harris, who's also, we're not related, but we're friends, who's also in the film, has said the same thing. That when that thing hit over the holidays, a couple of holiday seasons ago, it was like my Twitter feed and people stopping me in airports and people it
That is so
blew
cool.
up.
Dude, you have no idea, and Sam, for that matter, has no idea what you've done for us. So the fact that we could do that for you, man, like that really means a lot. I'm glad we could do that, man. That's awesome, man.
It was awesome. It was great.
Well, speaking of documentaries, back to Right Here, Right Now, Ryan and I are filming our next documentary.
I heard.
And so we're doing it in front of a live audience on February 10th. If you're in the Los Angeles area, we're doing 2 tapings. The 3 p.m. is already sold out, but there are a few tickets left for the 7 p.m. show. It's basically a follow-up to our Netflix documentary, Minimalism, and it's called The Minimalists, Less Is Now. So Ryan and I, over the last year, we went around the U.S. and Canada, and next is Australia, and we've given this talk about living a meaningful life with less. And so what we're going to do is we're finally going to capture it on film in this beautiful warehouse space in Los Angeles. And we want to invite all of you to attend. So it's basically, this film's going to combine the in-depth talk about minimalism that Ryan and I give. We're going to build a documentary around that talk and sort of go into it. It's different from the documentary Minimalism because we scratch the surface on a bunch of different topics in that. We're going to dive really deep on sort of the events that got Ryan and me over to this thing called minimalism and living more intentionally, being these suit and tie corporate guys and sort of walking away from that. And so that is the documentary that we're working on next. You can find the details of that over at our website, theminimalists.com. Just click on our tour page there. It's February 10th. And this Friday, also on Patreon. So if you're one of our Patreon supporters, we recorded a live tour stop with our friend Colin Wright. He's the peripatetic minimalist traveler. He travels to a new country every 4 months, carrying with him everything he owns. We did a live event with him in Detroit, and we're going to release that exclusively for our Patreon supporters. So head on over to patreon.com/theminimalists. And that's all I got, Ryan.
Dude, you're not going to tell them? You're not going to tell our Patreon supporters about what we've done with their money?
Oh, yeah.
Dude, we totally got a new office.
We did. Well, new
so
studio.
Exciting.
Yeah, so we're moving into this
I was in Montana, and Josh sent me pictures. I was really, really excited to come back. Sorry, go ahead.
So, we're working on this new studio space, and it's the reason we moved out here is we want to do a lot more things with film. And so we found that because the documentary came out and so it resonated with so many people, we had found we had pockets, people who read our books, people who read the blog, people who listened to the podcast. But the other way that we hadn't communicated was visually that way with the documentary. And then also doing other types of video as well. So web series or YouTube videos, mini documentaries, a lot of different things you can do with video, as you know, with all the TV stuff that you've done. And realizing like that is our next foray into bringing this message into more people's homes and ears and eyes is to do this podcast and film studio. So yeah, we just found a space. A
beautiful space.
Yeah,
I haven't been there yet. I'm going to go there later today and check it out. But yeah, I just want to say thanks to all the Patreon supporters, each and every one of you. Like it really helped us do this, and it's a beautiful building. And if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be able to do it. So Josh and I really look forward to providing some awesome content. I said it.
Oh no.
Oh my God, fire me. We are looking forward to creating some awesome things for you. Josh and I do not do content. We try to focus on meaningful creation. So we're really looking forward to that. Dan, anything that we want to leave the people with?
I want you guys to come on my podcast when the documentary comes out. It sounds great.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So I would love for that to happen.
Awesome.
Just in terms of leaving people with something, I would just say, don't beat yourself up about getting distracted. You can't hear it enough. You can't be a bad meditator. The only bad meditator is somebody who doesn't meditate. That's tweetable.
Yes.
So just do it. Even if it's just for a minute, it will make a difference. And if I'm wrong, send me a note on Twitter and tell me I'm a moron.
You ever had anyone tweet you and say that?
People tell me I'm a moron all the time, but
us
never,
too,
never for that.
But we're okay.
Never for that.
He's at Dan B. Harris on Twitter. You can find all the stuff 10%happier.com.
Yes.
Yeah, and check out his new book. Check out everything from Dan. Got anything else for us, Ryan?
No, man. I'm just glad we could have Dan here to outshine us on this podcast.
I highly doubt that, but thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
So fun
Thanks for
to
being
see you
here,
guys.
Here are some comments and tips from our listeners.
Hello, my name is Erica from Ohio. A vegan woman at a live event in December asked about her dilemma when choosing to buy plastic vegan clothing products versus leather ones. She was concerned that pleather products are not as sustainable as leather ones because they wear out faster. And I'm calling in with some advice to help extend the shelf life of your products so they don't go into the landfill before their time. I only own one pair of black boots that have survived 6 brutal Ohio winters so far by following these 3 steps. 1. If you have access to a waterproofing agent, apply it liberally. 2. If you live where it snows and salt accumulates on your boots, wipe the salt off with a wet rag or cloth when you get home. And 3. If your zipper starts snagging, WD-40 is your best friend. If you still like leather better, look into a secondhand market.
Hi, this is Mike from Rochester. I'm calling in response to a question that Stephanie from Georgia posed in one of your recent podcasts in Georgia. She was trying to, it sounded like, rationalize her love of shopping or her enjoyment of shopping. My response, and something I've kind of come up for myself, is instead of buying in excess, buying to replace. So if you want to buy if you find a shirt that's better than your current shirt, or you find a piece of furniture that's better than your current piece of furniture, that will coincide with your values as well as your finances. So you'll keep what you've determined to be a reasonable amount of stuff, and within your means to pay for it and afford it financially.
Hi, my name is Katie from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and my tip is for Teresa from the Phoenix podcast. She was having trouble with getting rid of some of the mementos from her dad. I was really close with my grandma, who passed away probably about 12 years ago, and I ended up with a lot of her jewelry because that was what I played with as a kid. And as I've gone through my minimizing journey, I've decided to keep one thing, and it's her class ring from 1948. I wear it every day. In fact, that's too small now. I can't even take it off. And everything else I have let go, and that way I can always keep her with me. However, I don't have the burden of all of her other jewelry.
All right, y'all, that's it for this episode. If you have a question for the Minimalists, give us a call, 406-219-7839. You can also send a voice memo right from your phone to podcast@theminimalists.com. And if you leave here with just one message, we hope it's this: love people and use things, because the opposite never works. Thanks for listening, y'all.
See you next time.
Every little thing you think that you need, every little thing you think that you need, every little thing that's just feeding your greed. Oh, I bet that you'd be fine without it. Every little thing that you gotta have, every little thing that you gotta have, you gotta reach for, and you gotta grab. Oh, I bet that you'd be fine without it. So tear your eyes away, or tear your eyes